The cardboard box was heavier than it looked, and when I set it down on my grandmother's kitchen table, the whole thing wobbled like it might give out. That was the first thing my brother said to me after I'd driven 6 hours straight from Tucson. Not welcome home, not glad you made it, not even a plain hello. He looked at the box, looked at me, and said, "You're seriously moving back here? Into Grandma's place?" I didn't answer him right away. I was too tired, the kind of tired that sits behind your eyes and makes everything feel like you're watching it through dirty glass. My grandmother had died 11 days earlier. A stroke, quiet and fast. The neighbor found her on a Tuesday morning when she didn't come out to water her tomatoes. Grandma had lived alone in that house for 31 years, ever since my grandfather passed. She'd raised her garden, gone to her church, and kept that house so clean you could eat off the baseboards. And when she died, she left behind a 3-bedroom house in rural Idaho, a 1997 pickup truck, 40 acres of scrubby timberland that hadn't been logged since the 90s, and a storage shed out back that nobody had opened in years. She left the house and the timberland to me. She left her savings account, about $84,000, to my brother. I didn't find this out until the reading of the will, which happened in a county attorney's office that smelled like old coffee and carpet cleaner. My brother sat across from me in a plastic chair. When the attorney finished reading, there was a long silence. Then my brother laughed, not a mean laugh, almost like he couldn't help it, like something surprised him. "She left you the property," he said. "She did." He leaned back. "You know that land is basically worthless, right? The timber's too thin to sell, the road back there is almost impassable in winter, and the house needs a new roof. She left you a money pit. I know what condition it's in." He shook his head slowly. He had that look, the one I remembered from when we were kids, when he'd explained to me why something I wanted to do was stupid. He was 4 years older, and he'd been practicing that look my entire life. "I'm not trying to be cruel," he said. "I just think you need to hear it from someone. That land isn't an inheritance, Meg. It's a liability." He called me Meg. He knew I'd gone by my full name, Megan, since I was 14. He did things like that, small corrections disguised as affection. I picked up my copy of the will, folded it, put it in my jacket pocket, and left. That night I drove to the house. It was late October, and the air already had that particular Idaho sharpness to it. Not cold enough to snow yet, but cold enough that you could feel what was coming. I parked in the gravel drive and sat in my car for a while looking at the house. The porch light was on. I didn't know who had turned it on. Maybe it had never been turned off. The motion sensor had always been finicky. Grandma used to joke that it thought the deer were coming to visit. I went inside. The house smelled like her, lavender soap and old paper and something faintly sweet that I'd never been able to name. I stood in the hallway for too long, just breathing it. I had quit my job in Tucson 3 weeks before she died. That's the part I hadn't told my brother. I'd been a property manager for a mid-size apartment complex. Good salary, decent benefits, work that I was good at, but that had been slowly emptying me out for 5 years. I'd given notice on a Friday. On the following Tuesday, my mother called to tell me about Grandma. So I was untethered in 2 directions at once. I slept in Grandma's bed that first night, because mine was buried under boxes, and I was too tired to deal with it. The mattress was old, and it creaked when I shifted. And I lay there staring at the ceiling, doing the math I'd been doing since the attorney's office. The house needed a roof. I'd gotten a rough estimate already, somewhere between $14,000 and $18,000 depending on materials. The furnace was original, probably 25 years old. The plumbing was functional but aging. I had $22,000 in savings. My brother wasn't wrong that the numbers were tight. He just thought that was the end of the story. He called the next morning while I was drinking coffee on the porch. "I've been thinking," he said, "and I want to make you an offer. I'll buy out your share of the estate, the property, the land, all of it, for $40,000. You walk away with cash, I take on the headache, and we both move on. That's less than 3 times what the roof alone will cost." Meg, the land is appraised at basically nothing. You know that. I know what the county appraises it at. That's not the same as what it's worth. There was a pause. What are you planning to do with 40 acres of scrub timber in the middle of nowhere? I haven't decided yet. That's not reassuring. I didn't say it was supposed to be. He made a sound, somewhere between a sigh and a laugh. You've always done this. Made things harder than they need to be. Grandma did too. You're just like her. He said it like it wasn't a compliment. I didn't take his offer. I also didn't tell him to stop calling me Meg. I spent the first week going through the house. Not clearing it out, I wasn't ready for that, but cataloging, getting to know the place as the person who would now be responsible for it. I fixed the back screen door, which had a broken spring. I cleaned out the gutters. I called 3 different roofing companies and compared their bids. I went through the kitchen cabinets and found a bread maker still in its original box, 2 sets of dishes, and approximately 400 packets of soy sauce that Grandma had apparently been collecting from takeout orders for a decade. The shed was the last thing. It was out past the garden, a small wooden structure with a corrugated metal roof, and a padlock that I had to find the key for in a junk drawer. I'd been putting it off without quite admitting to myself that I was putting it off. Grandma had been private about the shed. When I was a child and asked what was in it, she'd say, "Oh, odds and ends," and redirect me toward cookies or the garden or whatever project she was working on. I'd learned not to push. The key was on a plain ring, unlabeled, tucked beneath a broken watch, and a handful of foreign coins in the back of the kitchen junk drawer. I almost missed it. The padlock opened on the 3rd try. The smell hit me first, sawdust and machine oil, and something drier underneath, like old paper left in the sun. I felt for a light switch and found a pull cord instead. The single bulb came on and showed me a room maybe 12 feet by 16, packed neatly from floor to nearly ceiling. Not junk. Tools, first, and not just basic tools. A full woodworking setup, a bench with a vise, 3 different hand planes, a set of Japanese pull saws still in their sheaths, a collection of chisels arranged in a wooden rack that someone had built specifically for them. They were well maintained, oiled, used recently or recently enough that they hadn't rusted. On the shelves along the back wall, wood, not scraps, carefully selected boards, sorted by species. I could identify walnut, cherry, maple. Some of it was thick cut, the kind you didn't find at a hardware store, the kind that came from a sawyer or a specialty mill. And on the workbench itself, in various stages of completion, 4 pieces of furniture. A small side table with tapered legs, hand-cut dovetails visible at the corners, a jewelry box with an inlaid lid. The inlay was a simple geometric pattern, but the execution was precise, the seams nearly invisible. A child's rocking chair, small enough for a 3-year-old, with a curved back and hand-carved spindles, and a writing desk, larger than the others, with a drop front and cubby holes inside. It wasn't finished. The top still needed its final coat and 2 of the drawer pulls were missing, but what was there was exquisite. I stood in that shed for a long time. My grandmother had learned woodworking, somewhere in the later decades of her life, in this small locked building behind her garden. She had taught herself to make furniture with hand tools, and she had gotten good, better than good. The pieces on that bench were the work of someone who understood the craft at a real level. I didn't even know she owned a hand plane. I started crying, which surprised me. Not heaving grief, just the quiet kind, that comes on when you realize you missed something about someone and you'll never be able to go back and ask them about it. I stood there in the smell of sawdust and thought about all the Tuesday afternoons I'd spent in her kitchen eating cookies while she was probably out here making this. I didn't call my brother that day. I called him 3 days later after I'd done some research. I'd photographed every piece in the shed and sent the photos to an antique and fine furniture appraiser in Boise, who a woodworking forum had recommended. She came out on a Saturday. She spent 40 minutes in the shed, turning pieces over, examining joints, running her fingertips along the inlay on the jewelry box. "Do you know where she learned?" she asked me. "I don't know," I said. "These are hand-cut dovetails. That's not common anymore, even among hobbyists. She held up one corner of the side table. This is walnut, good walnut. The wood alone on these 4 pieces is probably $500 to $600 at retail, and she chose well. Grain orientation, figure. She knew what she was picking. She gave me a range for each piece. The rocking chair, $800 to $100. The jewelry box, $400 to $100. The side table, $100 to $100. The writing desk, once finished, $3,500 to $4,500. The desk is exceptional, she said. I'd want to show it to a colleague who specializes in studio furniture. This style, the proportions, it reminds me of work from the hand tool revival movement. Has she sold work before? Not that I know of. She should have. She had a real eye. After the appraiser left, I sat in the garden for a while. The tomato plants were long dead, cut back by frost, but the raised beds were still neat, the edges clean. Grandma had kept this place with the same precision she'd apparently kept her workshop. Everything in its right place, cared for, intended. I thought about her leaving me the property. My brother had assumed it was a mistake, or sentiment, or the confused thinking of an old woman who loved her granddaughter a little too much to be practical. It hadn't occurred to him that she might have had a reason, that she might have known, better than any of us, what was out here, that she might have been leaving me not a money pit but a starting point. I called him that evening. I'm not selling, I said. Meg, my name is Megan. I've asked you before. A pause. Okay, Megan. He said it with a flatness that meant he thought I was being difficult. I'm trying to help you. I know you think you are. That property's going to eat your savings. You don't have income right now. You left your job. How did you know that? Silence. Mom told you. More silence. It doesn't matter, he said finally. The point is, you're in a precarious situation, and I'm offering you a way out. I don't want a way out. I want to know what's here. What do you mean? What's here? I thought about the shed, the tools, the walnut boards sorted by grain, the writing desk with its missing drawer pulls waiting to be finished. I thought about my grandmother in her apron, slipping out the back door on a Tuesday afternoon while I ate her cookies in the kitchen, going to the place where she made things with her hands. Grandma left me something real, I said. I'm just starting to understand what it is. He didn't have an answer for that. The following weeks were the hardest, not emotionally, actually. Emotionally, they were some of the clearest weeks I'd had in years. The hard part was practical. I was burning through savings. The roof bid I accepted came in at $15,800. The furnace, I decided, could wait one more winter with some maintenance. I picked up freelance bookkeeping work through a contact from my property management days. Not glamorous, not well paid, but enough to keep me from touching the savings faster than I had to. I also started learning. I found a community woodworking school in Boise that offered weekend intensives. I signed up for hand tool joinery starting at the beginning, sharpening, planing, basic joints. The instructor was a retired cabinet maker named Hal who had opinions about everything and was not shy about sharing them. He watched me work for about 20 minutes the first morning, adjusted my grip twice without asking permission, and said, "You've held a hand plane before." "My grandmother's," I said. "Good, teacher." She didn't know she was teaching me. He nodded like that made sense to him, which I appreciated. I finished the writing desk in February. It took me longer than it would have taken my grandmother. I had to figure out the drawer mechanism, and I made one of the cubby holes a 1/4 inch too narrow and had to recut it. But when I put the final coat of oil on the top and set it in the light from the shed's one window, it was hers and mine together. I could see where her work ended, and mine began if I looked closely. Nobody else would be able to tell. The appraiser came back for it. Her colleague, the studio furniture specialist, came with her. The writing desk sold at a small regional auction in April for $4,100. I split the proceeds in my head, half into the roof fund, half into a savings account I labeled, somewhat arbitrarily, workshop. I didn't tell my brother about any of this for a long time. Not out of spite, exactly. More because it wasn't ready to be told. It was still becoming something, and I didn't want his voice in the middle of it while it was still fragile. He called in March, during a snowstorm, while I was in the shed finishing the desk. I just wanted to check in, he said, and he sounded different, quieter. How's the house? Good. Roof's done. House is solid. Good. A pause. Mom said you seemed like you were doing okay. I'm glad. He said it plainly, without the flatness from before. I'm sorry I was pushy about the buyout. I set down the brush I'd been using and looked at the desk. You thought you were protecting me. I thought I knew better than you. You thought the same thing you always thought, that Grandma made a mistake. Quiet for a moment. She didn't, did she? He said. No, I said. She really didn't. There was a long pause, and then he asked, carefully, like he wasn't sure he had the right to ask. What was in the shed? So I told him. I told him about the tools, the wood sorted by species, the 4 pieces on the workbench, the hand-cut dovetails and the jewelry box inlay and the rocking chair spindles, the appraiser, the auction, the desk that had sold for just over $4,000. I told him about the weekends in Boise learning to sharpen and plane. I told him about Hal, who had opinions about everything. He was quiet through most of it. I didn't know she did that, he said finally. Neither did I. She never mentioned it. She didn't talk about it to anyone, as far as I can tell. She just did it for years, apparently. Another silence. That sounds like her. It did. It sounded exactly like her. I found something else, I said. After the desk sold, I hesitated because I hadn't told anyone this yet. In the back of the shelf, behind some of the wood stock, a binder, her notes, measurements, wood selection, sketches of pieces she was planning, and a list. What kind of list? People she was going to leave pieces for. My name was on it, yours too. She had a piece planned for you, a small cabinet, it looks like. She hadn't started it yet. The silence on his end went on long enough that I thought the call had dropped. She planned something for me, he said. Yeah, even though she left you the property. She left you the money, I said. That was practical. She knew you had a mortgage, kids in school. She was thinking about what each of us actually needed. But she also had a piece planned for you. She wasn't choosing between us. She knew us. Both of us. I heard him exhale slowly. Do you think you could make it? He said. The cabinet. Using her plans, I looked around the shed, the workbench, the chisels in their rack, the walnut boards along the back wall waiting. Yeah, I said. I think I could. I'd like that, he said. I'd really like that. We talked for another hour that night, longer than we'd talked in years. By the time we hung up, the snow outside had stopped and the whole property was quiet under it. The house, the garden beds, the shed with its single window glowing amber in the dark. I stood outside for a few minutes before going in, long enough to feel the cold properly, long enough to look at the place the way my grandmother might have looked at it, as something that could be built, piece by piece, into something worth keeping. I went back inside and started sketching the cabinet.